Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Sheviis, chapter 1, Halacha 5. Now, all the last Mishnahs dealt with prohibitions against plowing before Sheviis. And those laws are going to be applied only to an orchard of mature trees. How do we know they're mature trees? They're going to produce a certain yield of fruit that came up in the Mishnah. Now, what about if you have saplings? Now, you might have an immature field. We know that we have the laws of Orlah, and it means that you can't use the fruit until the fourth year. So, you might have saplings, and your saplings can produce a little bit of fruit. You can't use it, but you're not there growing it for the fruit. You're growing it for the trees because the tree might live for 60, 70, 100 years and produce fruit for that. You're not really concerned about the first couple of years of growth. So what about saplings? I mean, trees, orchards have to start from somewhere. What's going to be the law on saplings? Now, I want to point out what's going to be happening with the laws of 10 saplings because this is going to be a halacha Moshe Sinai, and the Gemara is going to start off talking about halacha Moshe Sinai because this is going to turn out to be derived from that. So the Mishnah starts off, it says, if 10 saplings were evenly distributed throughout a bet seah. So what is that going to be? That's going to be where you have it divided into 10 equal sections, and the sapling is planted in each section. And the Mishnah is going to say one may plow the entire bet seah on their account until Rosh Hashanah. Now, why would that be? The Rosh is saying that saplings are frail, and they would dry up if the land around them is not plowed. Consequently, in the case of saplings, plowing is permitted until Rosh Hashanah because the Torah is concerned for a person's property. And the idea is that the Mishnah is teaching that one may not plow the entire bet seah unless it contains 10 saplings. And this is going to be in contrast with everything that we were looking at with mature trees. In your mind, you have to keep in mind that there are saplings and mature trees in the halacha, and the two are going to be different. So in the case of the mature trees that we were covering, 3 per bet seah would be just fine. And the reason for the difference is that a sapling requires only 1/10 of a bet seah for its nourishment, while mature trees require 1/3. And therefore, plowing the entire bet seah would not benefit every tree unless 10 saplings were present. Whereas in the case of mature trees, 3 are enough. And if there are fewer than 10 saplings in the bet seah, the idea is that one may not plow the entire bet seah even before Shavuot, since fewer than 10 saplings do not need an entire bet seah for their nourishment, and they fail to constitute a field of trees. And that's going to be the idea. Now, the Chazan Ish in 17:8 is going to say that plowing the entire bet seah is forbidden as soon as Pesach arrives, and at that point, one may plow only the immediate vicinity of each sapling. And the smaller area, however, may be plowed even after Shavuot until Rosh Hashanah. That's the idea. But again, you have to have 10 saplings in the bet seah to qualify for all of this. So the Mishnah is going to continue. It's going to say, but if 10 saplings form a straight line or an arc, one may not plow for them any more than their need. So, we were talking about trying to take a bet seah, put 10 on, and spacing them in a row of 2 rows of 5. And so then that would be one kind of field of trees. Now, this is talking about taking the saplings, again, not mature trees, saplings, and putting them in a straight line. So what that's saying is that one may not plow more than their need. In other words, the area that's occupied is going to be such where, it's not concentrated in formation, and it's, it's not really distributed, in a normal way because you're taking 10 trees and you're clumping them together, and you're doing that on a betseya, so it's going to be very, very tight. Definitely, you're not going to be able to get a plow through between those trees if you're putting 10 in a single line. So the Mishnah was talking about this ruling about 10 saplings, and that's going to turn out to be a halacha Moshe Sinai. Now, before we talk about the law of 10 saplings, the Gemara is going to talk about other laws that are also halacha Moshe Sinai. So the Gemara starts off and says, Rabbi Zera, Rabbi La, and Rabbi Yasa said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the willow ceremony originates from the law, the oral law, transmitted to Moses at Sinai. What is this? Well, each day of Sukkot, you'd have a ceremony involving willow branches that was performed at the temple courtyard. And basically what would happen is you'd have the willow branches, they'd be stood up against the wall in the temple on the altar, and the Kohanim would circle the altar carrying a lulav and other species. And another idea is that the Kohanim would circle the altar carrying the willow branches and then stood them up on the altar. It was two different opinions onto exactly how that worked, but nonetheless, the willows are there, the altar's there, the Kohanim's there, and it's happening on Sukkot. So the Gemara is going to comment, it's going to say this, and this differs from Abba Shaul, for Abba Shaul said, the willow ritual has a scriptural source as follows. It says, the words, and brook willows, this, by the way, is talking about Leviticus 23:40, and that commands the taking of the 4 species. It says, and you shall take for yourself on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, the branches of a date palm, a shoot of a plaited tree, and brook willows. Basically, Abba Shaul is explaining that the plural of willows is alluding to 2 separate willow obligations. The obligation to take the willows as one of the 4 species, and the obligation to take the willows in the temple. Now, very interesting. The fruit, well, that's going to be singular. The shoot of plaited tree, that's going to be singular. So, it's interesting. Brook willows is going to be plural. That's what Abba Shaul's point is. And so he said that, the words and brook willows implies 2 mitzvahs that are done with willows. One mention of willows is for the mitzvah of lulav, says the Gemara, and one mention, the other mention for willow, is the willow ceremony of the temple. So because this is in the plural, Abba Shaul is saying that it means that there's 2 ceremonies, 2 uses for it. So the idea is that Abba Shaul is deriving the ceremony from Scripture, and he holds that it is not a halacha Moshe Sinai, which by definition does not have a scriptural source. He's saying this has a scriptural source. Now, the Gemara is going to mention other halachas Moshe Sinai. Rabbi Ba, Rabbi Chia, and in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, said the willow ceremony and the water libation originate from the oral law transmitted to Moses at Sinai. And the Gemara is going to comment, and this differs from Rabbi Akiva. For Rabbi Akiva said, the water libation has a scriptural source as follows. In connection with the Tamid of the 2nd day of Sukkot, it is written, and their libations. It's not mentioned, by the way, and its libation. So the mem that's added for the mem was added for an exegetical purpose. So the idea is that the Torah could have written the word as veniska, but instead it wrote it by adding the letter mem, veniskehem. So the letter yud would not be considered extra because it had been added on account of the plural form created by the mem. So that whereas the mem changes the meaning of the word, the yud serves only as a vowel. That's the idea. So that mem basically he's saying is going to be in there, and that's going to be extra. So the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say, in connection with the Tamid of the sixth day, it is written, and its libations, and they're saying that the Yud is added for an exegetical purpose, and in connection with the Musaf of the seventh day, it is written. So on the connection of the Tamid of the sixth day, it is written, and its libations, and it's adding it with a Yud, and the next one in the Torah, it's taking from different verses. One is going to be from Numbers 29:19. Then it's going to be talking about the Musaf. Then it's going to be talking about the Tamid of the sixth day. That's going to be in Leviticus 29:31, and then it's going to be talking about the Musaf of the seventh day, not the sixth day. The last one was the sixth day. Now it's going to be seventh day, and that's going to be in Numbers 29:33. And in each of these, there's an extra letter. So the first one has an extra mem. The second one has an extra yud there for that same word, Niska, and then the third one is going to have, again, written with this extra mem. So it's going to spell the word mayim. So the Gemara continues, and it says, and in connection with the Musaf of the seventh day, it is written in accordance with their law, and instead with kamish thought, accordance with the law, a mem is added for an exegetical purpose. So the extra letter would be mem yud mem, which is mayim. That's the Hebrew word for water. So the Torah, according to Rabbi Akiva, is alluding to the water libation that would be performed in the temple on Sukkot. So you see there that there's a little bit of disagreement. They're presenting it as a halacha Moshe Sinai, but there's two greats that are saying that it's actually going to be Doraita. One is Rabbi Akiva, one is Abba Shaul. So this Mishnah is going to permit plowing until Rosh Hashanah, but that's only going to be a field of saplings. And in the time of the Gemara, the people plowed until Rosh Hashanah even for mature trees. So the Gemara is going to explain how this came to be allowed. And the Gemara says, Rabbi Chia bar Abba asked before Rabbi Yochanan, and nowadays, why do they plow for mature trees? Rabbi Yochanan said to him, when the oral law about a field of saplings was transmitted to Moses at Sinai, it stated that if they wanted to plow, they may plow, and if a court deems it necessary to allow plowing for mature trees, it may extend the permit to include mature trees. So basically what they're saying is that, another court the earlier court allowed a later court to repeal it. But by the way, another court is allowed to put it back into place. That's also the provision. This, by the way, was instituted by Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. They both agreed on this original thing, and it was the court of Rabban Gamliel that repealed it. So, dealing with the willow ceremony and the water ceremony, water libation, the law of the 10 saplings is going to originate from Sinai. The Gemara is going to quote what seems to be a dissenting view. Rabbi Bar Bazavdi said, in the name of Rabbi Hunya of Bikas Chevron, the willow ceremony, the water libation, and the law of the 10 saplings were enacted by the prophets. And the Gemara is going to ask, must we say that they disagree? Is there a dispute between this statement of Rabbi Yochanan, who said above that these laws originate from Halacha Moshe at Sinai? The Gemara is going to answer that there's actually going to be no dispute. Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Bun, said in the name of Rabbi Levi, thus was the law transmitted to them by Moses, as Rabbi Yochanan was teaching, but they forgot it. And the Gemara says, and the later prophets arose and rediscovered the original laws. So the idea is that, literally they agreed with the opinion of the first ones, And although these 3 laws, the willow ceremony, water libation, and 10 saplings, were taught at Mount Sinai, they were forgotten during the Babylonian exile, and the court of Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi rediscovered them through prophecy. That's going to be the idea. And there's another teaching. About this, that the later prophets achieved this extraordinary accomplishment by exerting themselves to the point of self-sacrifice. Gemara is going to comment. It's going to say, this serves to teach you that anything for which the members of a court sacrifice themselves will ultimately be established by them as if it had been said to Moses at Sinai. In other words, Pnei Moshe is saying that scholars who make tremendous effort to reach the truth can even rediscover laws that had been taught to Moses at Sinai but were subsequently forgotten. And there's another teaching about the importance of expending effort in the study of Torah. And this reflects that which Rabbi Manna said. The phrase, for it, the Torah is not an empty thing for you, can be understood as implying that if you find that it is empty, the failure stems from you. It's not the Torah. And why do you find it empty? Because you do not toil to understand it. And the verse continues. And it says, for it is your life. And the Gemara says, when is it your life? When you toil to understand it as though your life depended on it. In other words, in order to understand the Torah, you must treat it as your life. Just as a person would make every effort to preserve his life, so too he must make every effort to understand the Torah. And this gets exemplified by the court of Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who toiled at the words of Torah to the point of self-sacrifice, and they were ultimately successful in reestablishing lost laws from Sinai after the Babylonian exile. So, having listed 3 laws that were reestablished in Babylonia, the Gemara is going to mention 2 laws that actually originated over there. So, there's going to be a link between the next teaching and the previous sugya, and both are going to include a statement of Rabbi Yochanan dealing with the willow ceremony. So Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Chia Barva, you Babylonians, well, this is when Rabbi Chia Barva came up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yochanan told him that when Babylonian exiles came up to Eretz Yisrael, they brought with them 2 practices that became accepted here. And Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Chia Barva, you Babylonians were successful in establishing 2 matters that spread to Eretz Yisrael. That would be, one is prostrating oneself on a fast day. The other is taking a willow branch on the 7th day of Sukkot. And that is that, it's biblically forbidden to prostrate oneself on a stone floor with the arms and legs outstretched, because the Torah says, Leviticus 26:1, and in the land you shall not place a flooring stone upon which to prostrate oneself. And rabbinically, this means it's forbidden even where the floor is not stone. And the Babylonians permitted this form of bowing on a non-stone floor on a public fast. And the other case is that after the temple was destroyed, the prophets in Bavel enacted that on the 7th day of Sukkot, which is, by the way, Hoshana Rabbah, one should take a willow branch and beat it on the ground. The purpose of this ritual is to commemorate the willow ceremony performed in the temple. And although this ritual was established in Bavel, it got adopted in Eretz Yisrael. That's going to be the idea. So there's going to be a dissenting view about that. And Gemara says, but the rabbis of Caesarea said, even that practice of prostrating oneself on a fast day is weak, and it was not accepted in Eretz Yisrael. And the Or Chaim in 131.8 says that in Eretz Yisrael it was forbidden to fully prostrate oneself, even on public fast days. Rather, one had to incline his body to the side so his face did not touch the ground. So the Gemara is going to return to the subject of the Mishnah, which is going to be plowing a field of saplings before Sheviis. And it's going to quote a brisa which discusses saplings that produce as much as mature trees. Also, by the way, it's going to get into the category of, well, what is a mature tree and what is a sapling? Because we want to know that, right? So there's a brisa that teaches even if a sapling is productive, it is still subject to the law of saplings, which states that the entire betzea may not be plowed unless the density corresponds to 10 per betzea. And even if a mature tree is unproductive, it is still subject to the law of mature trees, which states that the entire betzea may be plowed if the density corresponds to 3 mature trees per betzea. So the mature tree, let's say it's weak, let's say it's dried out, guess what? It's still viewed as a mature tree. So, like with the law of mature trees, only 3 are required for betzea to permit it to be plowed for the entire betzea, and no plowing can be done after Shavuot. That's going to be the idea. Gemara is going to point out an internal contradiction in this brisa. The Gemara says, but now come and see the beginning of the same brisa. If a sapling resembles a mature tree, it is productive, and you treat it as a mature tree. But you say, in the section of the brisa quoted above, even if a sapling is productive, it is subject to the law of saplings, and the entire betzea may not be plowed unless the density corresponds to 10 per betzea. Now that looks like a contradiction, because we see a brisa that says if a sapling resembles a mature tree and is productive, you treat it as a mature tree, and that certainly does not correspond with what we just read before, where it says even if a sapling is productive, it is still subject to the law of saplings. So the Gemara is going to resolve this contradiction. Rabbi Huna said, what is meant by this brisa's clause, where it says, even if a sapling is productive, it is subject to the law of saplings, and the betzea may not be plowed unless the density corresponds to 10 per betzea. So it means that there is no case in which the required density for a sapling corresponds to 3 per betzea, for you should not argue 3 saplings that produce are like 3 mature trees that produce. So the idea here, says the Pnei Moshe, is that one may have thought that if a sapling produces as much as a mature tree, it is treated like a mature tree, and thus only 3 are required in order to be allowed to plow the entire betzea. The brisa is teaching that this is not so. Rather, as in the case with regular saplings, 10 are required. However, it is only in this respect that productive saplings are like regular saplings, and regarding the deadline for plowing, they are viewed as mature trees, meaning that the land may be plowed only until Shavuot and not Rosh Hashanah. And this is the brisa's intent, which states that saplings are treated like mature trees. In other words, that regular saplings are going to be treated differently than mature trees in 2 ways. And in order for one to be allowed to plow the entire betzea, the minimum number of saplings is going to be 10, whereas the minimum number of trees is going to be 3. And one may plow for saplings until Rosh Hashanah, but mature trees is only until Shavuot. So when the brisa ruled that productive saplings are like regular saplings, it was referring only to the first law, which requires 10 saplings per betzea. And when the brisa said that productive saplings are like mature trees, it was referring to the second law, which forbids plowing for mature trees after Shavuot. That's going to be the idea. Gemara says, similarly, when the brisa requires only 3 productive mature trees in a betzea, its point is that you should not think 3 mature trees that do not produce are like 3 saplings that do not produce. That is, one might have thought that if a mature tree produces as little as a sapling, then, in the case with saplings, one may not plow the entire betzea, should only 3 trees be present, rather than 10 are needed. But in fact, the brisa is teaching 3 do not suffice. And the idea is that in this respect, the unproductive mature trees are like regular trees, and regarding a deadline for plowing, they're going to be like saplings. So when the Beraisa says that they are treated like saplings, it means that plowing is permitted until Rosh Hashanah. That's the idea. Now the Gemara is going to finish everything up for the Halacha, and it's going to say, according to this, says the Gemara, it is necessary to say that in order to plow the entire Betseya, the required density for any sapling, even a productive one, corresponds to 10 per Betseya. And the required density for the mature trees, even an unproductive one, corresponds to 3 per Betseya. And the Gemara is basically going to be summing it up. Okay. Basically, what it's going to say is that productive saplings are subject to both stringencies. The first is that for one to be allowed to plow the entire Betseya, there has to be 10 saplings present. That's the first. The second is plowing is forbidden after Shavuot, and unproductive mature trees are going to be subject to both leniencies. For one to be allowed to plow the entire Betseya, only 3 trees are required, and plowing is permitted up until Rosh Hashanah. And the Vilna Goan, he's actually going to have the opposite conclusion. That the first opinion was by the Mara Fulda, and now the Vilna Goan is actually going to have the opposite conclusion. And basically, Vilna Goan is going to say productive saplings are subject to both leniencies, while unproductive mature trees are subject to both stringencies. Now, the Brisa is going to get to another point about reeds. Brisa, Mara is going to cite a Brisa. A field of reeds is judged as a field of grain, meaning that one may plow them only until Pesach. What are reeds for? Well, reeds are used for thatching for a house, and they can also be used to make baskets, things like that. And reeds are not exactly. They can also be used for fencing, by the way. Reeds are going to be planted so that they grow and thicken, and then you cut it down. It doesn't produce any fruit or anything like that. And the idea is that a field of reeds is not really like a field of trees, which may be plowed until Shavuot or even Rosh Hashanah. Rather, it has to be regarded as a field of grain, and you're only allowed to plow it until Pesach. And a reed is going to be, in many ways, very similar to a sapling. That's going to be something to keep in mind. So, Bryce's ruling is going to be qualified. Rabbi Abahu says in the name of Rabbi Yosa bar Hanina, they taught this ruling in regard to 10 reeds that are in 2 bete seah. In other words, since this case there are fewer than 10 reeds on a bet seah, it does not qualify as a field of saplings, which requires 10 per bet seah. Instead, it's classified as a field of grain, which will be plowed until Pesach. So this is really saying that a reed is similar to a sapling. Accordingly, as the law with saplings, there are 10 reed bushes in a betseya, and the entire betseya may be plowed until Rosh Hashanah. But if, however, there are fewer than 10 per betseya, as the Gemara's case, then one may cease plowing. You have to cease plowing at the end of Pesach. Now the Mishnah is going to go on to another point. It's going to say that if they, the 10 saplings, form a line or an arc, they do not constitute a field of saplings, and thus one may plow only the immediate vicinity of each sapling. In other words, you can't plow the whole betseya, you have to only plow underneath the branches. The Gemara is going to ask, and it's going to say, does this not disagree with Shmuel? For Shmuel said, in regard to the sale of 3 trees, even when they form a line, they constitute a field of trees. And the Gemara reconciles our Mishnah with Shmuel's statement. And it says there, in Shmuel's statement, since the trees are distributed throughout the betseya, you view the field as though they were full. And Shmuel refers to a line of trees that are spread out, filling the field, and so that the land is included in the sale. But here in the Mishnah, all the saplings are put in one place, and the Mishnah refers to a line of saplings that are concentrated in a place and do not fill the field, and therefore the land is not included with them, and only the immediate vicinity for each sapling may be plowed. That's the idea. So, to sum this up, the Rosh Cirilio is going to explain the Gemara's answer like this. It's going to say that Shmuel refers to mature trees whose branches are long, high, and substantial, and therefore a line of such trees, though they are relatively close, still is going to comprise a field of trees. And the Mishnah, in contrast, is referring to saplings, which typically lack long branches, and that's going to be the difference. So, in Halacha 6, we're going to get into the field of 10 saplings be plowed until Rosh Hashanah, and it's going to do more explanation about the law of 10 saplings, which turns out to be a halacha l'Moshe l'Sinai. Have a great day.